Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Defiance and watched the stars through the main viewing screen. 3 months had passed since they left Earth on humanity's first journey beyond the solar system. The ship was massive and powerful, with thick armor plating and advanced weapon systems that Earth's best engineers had designed. 200 crew members worked aboard the vessel, including scientists, soldiers, and explorers, who all shared the same dream of finding new worlds, and maybe even meeting other intelligent life. Lisa Rodriguez was bent over a control panel in the engine room, checking the ship's power systems. She had been the chief engineer for 5 years and knew every bolt and wire on the Defiance. The engines hummed with steady power as they pushed the ship through space at incredible speeds. Tony Blake sat at the weapons station on the bridge, keeping watch for any threats. He was a former Marine who had joined the Space Force when they started building the Deep Space Fleet. Amy Foster worked at the science station, scanning nearby star systems for signs of life or interesting planets to explore. The mission was supposed to be peaceful. Earth's leaders had sent them to explore and learn about what was out there beyond their home system. They carried gifts and messages of friendship in dozens of different languages that scientists thought aliens might understand. The ship had enough supplies to last 2 years, and advanced medical equipment to keep the crew healthy during the long journey. Everything changed when they entered the Kepler sector. The ship's sensors detected multiple alien vessels approaching from 3 different directions. The alien ships were sleek and dark with strange designs that looked nothing like human technology. Captain Morrison ordered his crew to their stations and tried to establish communication with the unknown vessels. War Commander Thex 9 sat in his command chair aboard the lead Zephyrian cruiser and studied the primitive vessel that had dared to enter his territory. The Zephyrian Empire had controlled this sector of space for over 1,000 years. They were tall creatures with gray skin and 6 arms that moved with deadly precision. Their ships were designed to strike fear into any species they encountered. Dozens of civilizations had surrendered to them without firing a single shot. The human ship looked clumsy and slow compared to Zephyrian vessels. Thex 9 had conquered many worlds and enslaved countless species. He knew weakness when he saw it. These creatures called humans would surrender quickly once they understood the power of the Zephyrian Empire. His ships moved into attack formation as he prepared to demand their immediate surrender. Captain Morrison received the alien transmission on his communication system. The voice was harsh and threatening as it spoke in broken English that the aliens had somehow learned from intercepted Earth broadcasts. The alien commander demanded that the humans surrender their ship immediately and prepare to be taken as prisoners to serve the Zephyrian Empire. Any resistance would result in the complete destruction of their vessel and the death of everyone aboard. Lisa Rodriguez monitored the alien ships from her engineering station. Their technology seemed advanced, but she noticed something interesting about their energy signatures. The alien vessels appeared to rely heavily on intimidation rather than actual firepower. Their weapons were designed to disable rather than destroy because they wanted to capture ships intact along with their crews for slave labor. Tony Blake studied the alien formation through his targeting systems. The enemy ships moved in predictable patterns that suggested they rarely faced serious opposition. Their tactics were meant to overwhelm weak opponents rather than fight against equals. He quietly began charging the Defiance's weapon systems while keeping them powered down to avoid detection. Amy Foster analyzed the alien transmissions and learned that these creatures had been raiding primitive worlds for centuries. They would attack defenseless planets and take the inhabitants as slaves to work in their mines and factories. The Zephyrian Empire had built their civilization on the suffering of others and considered themselves the rightful rulers of this part of the galaxy. Captain Morrison tried to negotiate with the alien commander. He explained that humans came in peace and wanted to establish friendly relations with other intelligent species. He offered to share human technology and knowledge in exchange for safe passage through their territory. The response from Thex 9 was immediate and harsh. The alien commander laughed at what he saw as pathetic weakness from an inferior species. The Zephyrian ships moved closer to the Defiance as Thex 9 prepared to board the human vessel. He had done this hundreds of times before with other species. A show of overwhelming force followed by threats of destruction usually convinced any resistance to collapse immediately. These humans would be no different from all the other weak species he had conquered. But Thex 9 had made a critical mistake. He had never encountered a species like humanity before. Humans did not surrender when threatened. They did not collapse when faced with superior numbers. They fought back with everything they had when cornered, and they never gave up when protecting their own people. The alien commander gave his final ultimatum. The humans had 60 seconds to surrender, or his ships would open fire. Captain Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were scared, but determined. None of them wanted to become slaves to an alien empire. They had come too far and sacrificed too much to give up without a fight. The countdown reached 0 and Thex 9 gave the order to attack. The first Zephyrian plasma bolt struck the Defiance's outer hull with tremendous force. The ship shook violently as alarms blared throughout the corridors. Sparks flew from damaged control panels as the crew struggled to maintain their balance. Emergency lights flickered on as the main power grid automatically switched to backup systems. The attack had caused significant damage, but the ship was still functional and ready to fight back. Lisa Rodriguez raced through the engineering sections, checking damage reports from automated systems. The alien weapon had punched through 3 layers of armor plating, but the main hull remained intact. She quickly rerouted power from non-essential systems to boost the shield generators and weapon arrays. Her hands moved across control panels with practiced efficiency as she brought the ship's defensive systems online. The Defiance had been built to take punishment and keep fighting. Captain Morrison gripped his command chair as another plasma bolt struck the ship. The Zephyrians were firing slowly and deliberately because they expected the humans to surrender after the first few hits. This was exactly what happened with every other species they had encountered. A show of overwhelming firepower, followed by demands for surrender, had worked for over 1,000 years of conquest. Tony Blake's fingers flew across his weapons console as he brought the ship's armament online. The Defiance carried kinetic railguns that could punch through solid metal at incredible speeds. Plasma torpedoes filled with superheated gas could melt through enemy armor like it was paper. Advanced targeting computers locked onto the alien vessels as weapons systems charged to full power. The humans were about to show these aliens what real firepower looked like. War Commander Thex 9 watched the human ship absorb his attack and waited for their surrender signal. The vessel was clearly damaged and taking on emergency power. Soon the primitive creatures would realize they had no choice but to submit to Zephyrian authority. He had conquered 47 different species using these exact same tactics. Fear and overwhelming force always worked against inferior civilizations. Amy Foster analyzed the alien attack patterns from her science station. The enemy weapons were designed to disable rather than destroy their targets. The Zephyrians wanted to capture human technology and enslave the crew for their empire. They were not prepared for a species that would fight back with lethal force. Her sensors detected that the alien ships had weak points in their armor where the hull plating was thinner. The second Zephyrian attack struck the Defiance's port side, causing more damage to the outer hull. More alarms sounded as emergency repair teams rushed to seal breaches in the ship's armor. The crew worked with calm efficiency despite the danger they faced. They had trained for this moment and would not let fear overcome their duty to protect their ship and their species. Captain Morrison made the decision that would change galactic history. Instead of surrendering or retreating, he gave the order to return fire with maximum force. The humans would not submit to alien tyranny. They would fight for their freedom and show these creatures that humanity was not another weak species to be conquered and enslaved. Tony Blake pressed the firing controls and unleashed the full power of human military technology. Kinetic rounds accelerated to incredible speeds as they tore through space toward the alien vessels. Plasma torpedoes followed behind the kinetic strike, carrying enough energy to vaporize solid metal. The Defiance's weapons had been designed to fight other human ships in theoretical space battles. Against alien technology, they were devastatingly effective. The first kinetic round struck the lead Zephyrian cruiser and punched completely through its hull. The alien ship's armor plating had been designed to stop energy weapons, not solid projectiles, moving at hypersonic speeds. Atmosphere vented from the massive hole as emergency systems tried to seal the breach. The plasma torpedo that followed expanded the damage as superheated gas melted through internal bulkheads. Thex 9 stared in shock as his flagship took critical damage from the human counterattack. No species had ever fought back so effectively against Zephyrian forces. The Yao, primitive vessel's weapons were far more advanced than his intelligence reports had suggested. The humans were not surrendering as expected. They were fighting with deadly precision and overwhelming firepower. The second Zephyrian cruiser tried to maneuver away from the human ship, but Tony Blake tracked its movement with his targeting systems. Another kinetic round, followed by a plasma torpedo, struck the alien vessel's engine section. The ship lost power and began drifting helplessly through space as its crew struggled to repair critical systems. 2 of the 3 attacking ships had been disabled in less than 5 minutes of combat. Lisa Rodriguez monitored the ship's weapon systems as they recharged for another strike. The human technology was performing better than expected against alien targets. Earth's engineers had built weapons capable of destroying enemy vessels with single hits. The Defiance carried enough ammunition to fight a prolonged battle against multiple opponents. The third Zephyrian ship fired desperately at the human vessel, but its plasma bolts were absorbed by the Defiance's reinforced shields. Amy Foster had analyzed the alien weapon frequencies and adjusted the shield harmonics to provide maximum protection. The enemy's technology was impressive, but predictable once humans understood how it worked. Captain Morrison ordered his crew to target the remaining alien ship's weapon systems. He wanted to disable rather than destroy the vessel so they could capture prisoners and learn more about the Zephyrian Empire. The humans needed intelligence about their enemies and their territory if they were going to survive in this dangerous part of the galaxy. Tony Blake fired precisely aimed shots that destroyed the alien ship's weapon arrays without breaching the main hull. The Zephyrian vessel was now completely helpless and at the mercy of the human crew. The attack that was supposed to result in quick surrender had instead led to total defeat for the alien forces. War Commander Thex 9 realized that he had made a fatal error in judgment. These humans were not another weak species to be conquered easily. They possessed advanced technology and the will to use it against their enemies. His empire had awakened something dangerous and powerful that could threaten Zephyrian dominance throughout the sector. The surviving alien crews sent distress signals back to their homeworlds reporting the devastating defeat. For the first time, in over 1,000 years, Zephyrian forces had been outfought and humiliated by an unknown species. The galaxy would soon learn that humanity was not to be underestimated. News of the Zephyrian defeat spread across their empire like wildfire. Admiral Cross Prime received the distress signals from the surviving ships with growing rage and disbelief. No species had ever defeated Zephyrian forces in open combat. The Empire had built its reputation on military supremacy and the fear it inspired in other civilizations. This humiliation could not be allowed to stand without massive retaliation. Captain Morrison stood in the Defiance's medical bay, watching Dr. Kate Wilson treat the few crew members who had been injured during the battle. The human casualties were minor compared to the devastating damage they had inflicted on the alien fleet. The ship's advanced medical equipment quickly healed burns and cuts while the crew prepared for whatever came next. Lisa Rodriguez worked around the clock to repair the damage to the ship's hull and upgrade their weapon systems. The battle had revealed weaknesses in their defensive capabilities that needed to be addressed. She used the ship's advanced manufacturing facilities to create stronger armor plating and more powerful shield generators. The Defiance would be ready if more alien ships arrived looking for revenge. Danny Wright sat at the communication station intercepting Zephyrian transmissions from across their territory. The aliens were using encryption that human computers could break with enough processing power. He learned about their military structure and discovered that a massive fleet was being assembled to destroy the human ship. The Zephyrians were bringing everything they had to crush this new threat. Admiral Cross Prime commanded over 50 warships from his massive flagship. He was the most successful military leader in Zephyrian history and had conquered more worlds than any other commander. The defeat of War Commander Thex 9 was a personal insult that demanded immediate vengeance. He would bring enough firepower to vaporize the human vessel and everyone aboard it. Amy Foster analyzed the intercepted alien communications and learned disturbing facts about the Zephyrian Empire. They had been enslaving primitive species for over 1,000 years and had destroyed countless civilizations that refused to submit. Entire worlds had been strip-mined for resources while their populations were forced into slave labor. The galaxy lived in fear of Zephyrian expansion. The human crew discovered that they had stumbled into a sector controlled by one of the most brutal and aggressive empires in known space. The Zephyrians considered themselves the master race destined to rule over all other forms of life. They showed no mercy to species that resisted their conquest and had committed genocide against those who fought back too effectively. Captain Morrison called his senior officers to a meeting in the ship's conference room. They needed to decide whether to retreat back to Earth or stay and fight against the incoming alien fleet. Running away would be the safer choice, but it would also mean abandoning any hope of peaceful exploration in this part of the galaxy. The Zephyrians would eventually find Earth and bring their war to humanity's home system. Tony Blake argued for staying and fighting the alien fleet. The Defiance had proven that human weapons were superior to Zephyrian technology. With proper tactics and preparation, they could defeat a much larger enemy force. The ship carried enough ammunition for an extended battle, and their manufacturing capabilities could produce more weapons during combat. Lisa Rodriguez supported the decision to fight but wanted to choose the battlefield carefully. The open space where they had fought the first battle favored enemies with superior numbers. She suggested moving to a nearby asteroid field where the Defiance could use hit-and-run tactics against the alien fleet. Large ships would have trouble maneuvering between the asteroids while smaller human vessels could move freely. Amy Foster had been studying the alien fleet composition through intercepted communications. The Zephyrians were bringing massive battleships designed to intimidate their enemies into surrender. These vessels were heavily armed, but slow and clumsy compared to human technology. They relied on overwhelming firepower rather than tactical skill or advanced weapons. Dr. Kate Wilson pointed out that the ship's medical facilities could treat wounded prisoners if they captured any alien survivors. Learning about Zephyrian biology and psychology would be valuable intelligence for future encounters. The human crew needed to understand their enemies if they hoped to defeat them consistently. Captain Morrison made the decision to stay and fight. The Defiance would move to the asteroid field and prepare for the arrival of the alien fleet. They would show the galaxy that humanity would not be intimidated by threats or overwhelmed by superior numbers. The crew had trained for this moment and were ready to defend their species against any threat. The ship moved through space toward the dense asteroid field that Amy Foster had identified as the ideal battlefield. The rocks would provide cover for the Defiance while limiting the maneuverability of larger enemy vessels. Captain Morrison had fought in space combat simulations during his military training and understood how to use terrain to his advantage. Danny Wright continued monitoring alien communications as the Zephyrian fleet approached their position. Admiral Cross Prime was broadcasting threats and demands for surrender to the human ship. The alien commander promised to show mercy if the humans gave up immediately, but threatened complete annihilation if they continued to resist Zephyrian authority. Lisa Rodriguez finished installing the upgraded weapon systems and armor plating just as the ship reached the asteroid field. The Defiance was now more powerful and better protected than when it had left Earth. The manufacturing facilities had produced additional ammunition and replacement parts for critical systems. The crew was as ready as they could be for the coming battle. Navigation Officer Sam Carter plotted courses through the asteroid field that would allow the Defiance to strike at enemy ships and then disappear behind cover. The human vessel was smaller and more maneuverable than the massive Zephyrian battleships. Speed and agility would be their advantages against an enemy that relied on brute force and intimidation. The alien fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the star system. 50 warships spread out in attack formation as Admiral Cross Prime searched for the human vessel. His sensors detected the Defiance hiding among the asteroids, and he smiled with anticipation. The primitive species had trapped themselves in a place where they could not escape his overwhelming firepower. But Admiral Cross Prime had made the same mistake as War Commander Thex 9. He had underestimated human determination and ingenuity. The asteroid field was not a trap for the Defiance. It was a carefully chosen battlefield where human tactical superiority would decide the outcome rather than superior numbers or larger ships. Admiral Cross Prime ordered his fleet to advance into the asteroid field with overwhelming confidence. 50 massive warships moved forward in tight formation, expecting to crush the single human vessel through superior firepower. The Zephyrian battleships were each 3 times larger than the Defiance and carried enough weapons to destroy entire cities. No enemy had ever survived against such overwhelming force. Captain Morrison watched the alien fleet approach from his position behind a massive asteroid. The enemy ships were moving slowly and predictably as they searched for the human vessel. Their formation was designed to maximize intimidation rather than tactical effectiveness. The Zephyrians had never needed to fight against an equal opponent, and their tactics showed this weakness. Sam Carter had plotted multiple escape routes through the asteroid field that would allow the Defiants to strike and disappear before the enemy could respond. The human ship could accelerate faster and turn more sharply than the massive alien battleships. Navigation computers calculated precise courses between the floating rocks that larger vessels could not follow. Tony Blake targeted the lead Zephyrian battleship as it moved past their hiding position. The enemy vessel's shields were down because they did not expect to face serious resistance. The alien commander was broadcasting demands for surrender while his ship presented a perfect target for human weapons. One well-placed shot could cripple the massive vessel. The Defiants emerged from behind the asteroid at maximum speed and fired a full spread of kinetic rounds and plasma torpedoes at the lead battleship. The projectiles struck the alien vessel's unprotected hull and tore through multiple decks. Explosions rippled along the ship's length as critical systems were destroyed. The massive vessel began to list as its crew struggled to contain the damage. Admiral Cross Prime stared in shock as his flagship took devastating damage from the surprise attack. The human ship had appeared from nowhere and struck with deadly precision before disappearing again behind the asteroids. His sensors could not track the smaller vessel as it moved through the debris field. The primitive species was using tactics that the Zephyrian Empire had never encountered. Lisa Rodriguez monitored the ship's systems as they accelerated away from the damaged battleship. The human weapons had performed perfectly against the alien target. Enemy armor plating was designed to stop energy weapons, but could not withstand the kinetic force of solid projectiles moving at incredible speeds. The Zephyrian ships were vulnerable to human technology. The second alien battleship tried to pursue the Defiants, but crashed into a large asteroid while attempting to navigate the debris field. The massive vessel's hull cracked open as atmosphere vented into space. Emergency systems sealed the breach, but the ship was too damaged to continue fighting. 2 Zephyrian vessels had been eliminated without the humans taking any damage in return. Amy Foster analyzed the alien fleet's formation and identified their next target. The enemy ships were bunching together for mutual protection, which made them easier to attack with area effect weapons. The Zephyrians were reacting with fear rather than tactical thinking. Their commanders had never faced an opponent who could strike back effectively. Captain Morrison ordered another attack run against a group of 3 alien cruisers that had separated from the main fleet. The Defiants accelerated through a narrow canyon between 2 asteroids and emerged directly behind the enemy vessels. Their rear armor was thinner than their forward plating and presented excellent targets for human weapons. Tony Blake fired a concentrated barrage that disabled all 3 alien ships within seconds. Kinetic rounds punched through their engine sections, while plasma torpedoes melted through their weapon arrays. The Zephyrian vessels lost power and began drifting helplessly through the asteroid field. Their crews sent desperate distress calls as they realized they were defenseless. Admiral Cross Prime tried to coordinate his remaining ships, but the asteroid field made communication difficult. The humans were using the environment to their advantage, while his massive battleships were trapped by their own size and weight. The debris field that should have contained the enemy vessel was instead protecting it from his superior firepower. Danny Wright intercepted frantic communications between the alien ships as their formation began to collapse. Individual commanders were panicking and calling for retreat, while others demanded immediate reinforcements. The disciplined Zephyrian fleet was falling apart as human tactics exposed their tactical weaknesses. The Defiants struck again from a different direction, targeting a cluster of alien ships that had tried to take cover behind a large asteroid. The human vessel appeared above them and fired down through their weakest armor plating. Multiple explosions lit up the debris field as another 4 Zephyrian ships were disabled or destroyed by the surprise attack. Lisa Rodriguez had been monitoring enemy communications and discovered that the alien ships used a centralized command structure. All tactical decisions came from Admiral Cross Prime's flagship, which made the fleet predictable and slow to respond. If they could disable the command ship, the remaining vessels would be unable to coordinate their attacks. Captain Morrison approved the plan to target the alien flagship directly. The massive battleship was the most heavily armed and armored vessel in the enemy fleet, but it was also the least maneuverable. A direct assault would be dangerous, but eliminating the command structure would end the battle quickly. The Defiance accelerated toward the center of the alien formation where Admiral Cross Prime's flagship was directing the remaining vessels. Enemy ships fired desperately at the approaching human vessel, but their shots went wide as the smaller ship jinked between the asteroids. The Zephyrian gunners could not track a target moving so quickly through the debris field. Tony Blake concentrated all of the ship's firepower on the alien flagship's command section. Kinetic rounds and plasma torpedoes struck the massive vessel's bridge area, causing catastrophic damage to its control systems. The battleship lost power to its weapons and engines as critical components were destroyed by the sustained barrage. Admiral Cross Prime found himself trapped aboard a crippled vessel as his fleet fell apart around him. The humans had used superior tactics and technology to defeat a force 10 times their size. His empire's reputation for invincibility had been shattered by a single alien ship crewed by a species they had never encountered before. The surviving Zephyrian vessels began to retreat from the asteroid field as their command structure collapsed. Individual captains made the decision to save their ships rather than continue a hopeless battle. The mighty fleet that had arrived with such confidence was now fleeing in disorder from a single human vessel. Captain Morrison ordered his crew to pursue the retreating aliens and disable as many ships as possible. They needed prisoners for interrogation and intelligence about the Zephyrian Empire. The battle had proven that human technology was superior, but they still needed to learn about enemy capabilities and territory if they hoped to survive in this dangerous sector of space. The news of the second devastating defeat reached every corner of Zephyrian space within hours. A single human ship had destroyed or disabled over 30 warships, including Admiral Cross Prime's flagship. The survivors who managed to escape the asteroid field brought tales of impossible human tactics and devastating weapons technology. The mighty Zephyrian Empire was facing its first serious military defeat in over 1,000 years. Captain Morrison led a boarding party onto the crippled alien flagship to capture prisoners and gather intelligence. Security Chief Ryan Martinez and his team moved through the damaged corridors of the massive battleship, securing alien crew members. The Zephyrians were tall, gray-skinned creatures with 6 arms, but they offered no resistance to the human soldiers. Their arrogance had been replaced by fear and confusion. Dr. Kate Wilson established a medical station aboard the alien ship to treat wounded prisoners. The Zephyrian biology was different from humans, but her advanced medical equipment could adapt to treat their injuries. She discovered that the aliens had been genetically modified for warfare over thousands of years. Their natural aggression had been enhanced, while their capacity for empathy had been deliberately reduced. Amy Foster accessed the alien ship's computer systems and downloaded their star charts and military databases. The information revealed the true scope of the Zephyrian Empire, which controlled over 200 star systems. Dozens of enslaved species worked in their mines and factories, while their military forces continued to expand into new territory. The Empire was far larger and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Danny Wright interrogated captured alien officers using translation software that had learned their language from intercepted communications. The prisoners revealed that the Zephyrian Empire had been planning to expand into human space once they learned about Earth's location. The attack on the Defiance had been intended as the first step in conquering humanity's home system. The interrogations also revealed that other alien civilizations throughout the galaxy lived in constant fear of Zephyrian expansion. The Altarian, Trade Federation, the crystalline hive mind, and dozens of smaller species had all lost territory to the aggressive empire. Many civilizations had been completely enslaved or destroyed by Zephyrian forces over the centuries. News of the human. Victory spread beyond Zephyrian space through various communication networks. The Altarian Federation received reports about a new species that had defeated the sector's most feared military force. Crystalline hive mind scouts observed the aftermath of the battle and transmitted their findings back to their collective consciousness. Word traveled quickly through the galactic community that the balance of power was shifting. Captain Morrison sent a detailed report back to Earth, describing the encounters with the Zephyrian Empire. The message would take months to reach home, but it contained crucial intelligence about the threats humanity faced in deep space. Earth's military leaders needed to understand that peaceful exploration was no longer possible in a galaxy dominated by aggressive alien empires. Admiral Frank Collins received the transmission at Earth's Deep Space Communication Center. The report confirmed his worst fears about the dangers that awaited humanity among the stars. He immediately began coordinating with General Patricia Hayes and the military-industrial complex to accelerate warship production. Earth needed a fleet capable of defending human space against alien invasion. The captured Zephyrian officers revealed that their empire was only one of several aggressive civilizations that competed for territory and resources. The galaxy was a dangerous place where peaceful species were quickly conquered or destroyed by their more violent neighbors. Humanity would need to prove itself capable of defending its interests if it hoped to survive and expand among the stars. Lisa Rodriguez studied the alien technology recovered from the captured ships and discovered that Zephyrian weapons were designed for intimidation rather than effectiveness. Their massive battleships looked impressive, but were inefficient and vulnerable to well-designed human weapons. The Empire had relied on fear and overwhelming numbers rather than technological superiority. The human crew also learned that the Zephyrian Empire had been experiencing internal problems for decades. Many conquered species were planning rebellions against their alien oppressors. The defeats suffered at human hands had encouraged resistance movements throughout Zephyrian territory. The Empire's reputation for invincibility had been shattered, and subject worlds were beginning to hope for liberation. Captain Morrison made the decision to contact some of these resistance movements and offer human assistance in overthrowing their Zephyrian oppressors. The Defiance could not defeat the entire Empire alone, but they could help coordinate rebellions that would weaken alien control throughout the sector. A network of liberated worlds could become allies in the fight against tyranny. Amy Foster established communication with several enslaved species that had maintained secret contact networks despite Zephyrian efforts to prevent coordination between their subject worlds. These civilizations had preserved their cultures and technological knowledge while waiting for an opportunity to regain their freedom. The human victory had given them hope that rebellion was possible. The first species to respond was the Kalari, who had been enslaved 50 years earlier when their peaceful trading empire was conquered by Zephyrian forces. They offered to provide intelligence about alien military installations and supply routes in exchange for human assistance in liberating their home worlds. Other species quickly followed with similar offers of cooperation. Tony Blake began training alien volunteers in human military tactics and weapon systems. The liberated species had knowledge of Zephyrian weaknesses that could be exploited by coordinated attacks throughout their territory. A rebellion supported by human technology and leadership could succeed where individual species had failed acting alone. The Defiance became the center of a growing resistance network that stretched across dozens of star systems. Captain Morrison found himself commanding not just a single ship, but an alliance of species determined to overthrow their alien oppressors. The peaceful exploration mission had evolved into a war for galactic freedom. Dr. Kate Wilson established medical protocols for treating the various alien species that joined the resistance movement. Each civilization had different biological requirements, but human medical technology was advanced enough to adapt to their needs. The ship's medical bay became a symbol of human compassion and technological capability. Ryan Martinez organized security for the growing fleet of liberated vessels that had joined the human cause. Former slaves who had worked in Zephyrian shipyards brought detailed knowledge of alien technology and weaknesses. The resistance was growing stronger every day as more species chose to fight for their freedom rather than accept continued oppression. 6 months after the first battle, a massive human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler sector. Admiral Frank Collins commanded 30 of Earth's most advanced warships, including the newly commissioned UHS Retribution, UHS Liberty, and UHS Justice. Each vessel carried the latest weapons technology developed from lessons learned during the Defiance's encounters with alien forces. Humanity had mobilized its industrial capacity to build a fleet capable of challenging any threat. The Defiance had been refitted as the flagship of the human expedition, with Captain Morrison promoted to Commodore and given command of the liberation forces. His crew had become legends throughout the resistance movement as word of their victories spread to enslaved species across the galaxy. The ship that had started as a peaceful exploration vessel was now the symbol of hope for oppressed civilizations everywhere. Lisa Rodriguez had been working around the clock to upgrade the human fleet with technology captured from Zephyrian ships. The alien vessels used different power systems and weapon designs that could be adapted to improve human capabilities. Her engineering teams had developed hybrid systems that combined the best features of both technologies to create superior warships. Admiral Collins met with Commodore Morrison aboard the Defiance to plan their campaign against the Zephyrian Empire. Intelligence gathered by the resistance movement had revealed the locations of major alien military bases and supply depots throughout their territory. A coordinated attack on these targets would cripple the Empire's ability to maintain control over their enslaved worlds. The human fleet had brought more than just warships. Construction vessels carried equipment to build space stations and defensive platforms in liberated systems. Medical ships were equipped to treat wounded aliens from dozens of different species. Supply vessels carried food, medicine, and technological equipment that could be used to rebuild civilizations destroyed by Zephyrian conquest. Amy Foster had been analyzing intelligence reports from resistance cells throughout alien territory. The Zephyrian Empire was showing signs of internal collapse as news of human victories encouraged rebellions on dozens of worlds. The Empire's military forces were spread thin, trying to maintain control over increasingly restless subject populations. First target was the Zephyrian naval base at Kepler 7, which controlled shipping routes throughout the sector. The base was heavily fortified with orbital defense platforms and a garrison of 50 warships. Traditional tactics would require a massive assault that would cost many lives on both sides. Instead, Commodore Morrison proposed using the Resistance network to coordinate simultaneous attacks from within and without. Kalari volunteers had infiltrated the base's maintenance crews and planted explosive charges in critical systems. When the human fleet arrived, these charges would disable the defense platforms and create chaos among the garrison. The assault would succeed because the defenders would be fighting enemies both inside and outside their fortifications. Tony Blake coordinated the attack with precision timing that had become the hallmark of human military operations. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace just as the sabotage charges detonated throughout the alien base. Explosions rippled across the defense platforms as their weapon systems went offline. The garrison vessels found themselves trapped between the human fleet and internal explosions. The battle lasted less than 3 hours as human ships systematically destroyed or captured the remaining Zephyrian vessels. Advanced targeting systems allowed the human gunners to disable enemy ships without killing their crews unnecessarily. The goal was liberation, not extermination, and Commodore Morrison insisted on minimizing casualties whenever possible. Dr. Kate Wilson established medical stations throughout the captured base to treat wounded personnel from both sides. Human medical technology was used to save the lives of injured Zephyrians as well as liberated slaves. This demonstration of compassion had a powerful effect on alien populations who had never experienced mercy from their conquerors. The liberation of Kepler-7 triggered rebellions on 6 nearby worlds as enslaved populations rose up against their Zephyrian oppressors. Human ships arrived to support these uprisings with weapons, supplies, and medical assistance. Each successful rebellion encouraged others to join the growing resistance movement that was spreading throughout the sector. Ryan Martinez led boarding parties that secured Zephyrian ships and installations throughout the base. His security teams worked alongside alien volunteers who knew the locations of hidden weapon caches and command centers. The cooperation between humans and liberated species demonstrated the effectiveness of their alliance against tyranny. Admiral Collins established a forward command post at the liberated base and began coordinating operations throughout Zephyrian territory. Intelligence networks that had been operating in secret for decades now had human support to coordinate their activities. The resistance movement was transforming from scattered cells into an organized military force. The captured Zephyrian officers revealed that their empire's high command was debating whether to negotiate with the humans or launch a massive counterattack. Some leaders wanted to sue for peace before their entire civilization collapsed, while others demanded total war against the upstart species. The internal debate was weakening their response to the growing rebellion. Nicole Brown led fighter squadrons that provided close air support for ground operations on liberated worlds. Human pilots worked alongside alien volunteers who knew local terrain and enemy positions. The combined forces were proving highly effective at eliminating Zephyrian garrisons and freeing enslaved populations. The liberated base became a symbol of hope that spread throughout the galaxy. News of the successful attack reached the Altarian Trade Federation, the crystalline hive mind, and dozens of neutral species who had been watching the conflict with growing interest. For the first time in centuries, the Zephyrian Empire appeared, vulnerable to organized resistance. Sam Carter coordinated fleet movements throughout the expanding area of liberated space. Human ships needed to patrol vast distances to protect newly freed worlds from Zephyrian counterattacks. The navigation systems he had developed allowed the fleet to respond quickly to threats anywhere in their territory. communications officer. Danny Wright established contact with resistance movements in sectors beyond Zephyrian space. Other aggressive empires throughout the galaxy were watching the human campaign with growing concern. Species that had been planning their own conquests were reconsidering their strategies as they realized that humanity would defend any civilization that asked for protection. The success at Kepler-7 proved that the Zephyrian Empire could be defeated through coordinated action between humans and liberated species. More importantly, it demonstrated that humanity was committed to fighting for the freedom of all oppressed civilizations, rather than simply protecting their own interests. This moral stance attracted allies from across the galaxy who had been waiting for someone to challenge the established order. The human fleet prepared for the next phase of their campaign with growing confidence and determination. Each victory brought more species into their alliance, while weakening the grip of tyrannical empires throughout the sector. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity represented something new and dangerous to those who ruled through fear and oppression. The liberation campaign had been underway for 8 months, when representatives from the Altarian Trade Federation arrived at the human base on Kepler-7. The Altarians were an ancient civilization that had maintained neutrality for thousands of years by avoiding conflicts with aggressive empires. Their decision to make contact with humanity represented a major shift in galactic politics that would have far-reaching consequences. Ambassador Veltar led the Altarian delegation in their first formal meeting with human leadership. The tall, crystalline beings communicated through harmonic frequencies that required special translation equipment to understand. They had been observing the human campaign against the Zephyrian Empire with growing interest and admiration for human tactical abilities and moral principles. Admiral Collins welcomed the alien delegation aboard his flagship and listened to their proposal for a formal alliance between humanity and the Altarian Federation. The ancient civilization controlled major trade routes throughout the galaxy and had extensive knowledge about other species and empires. An alliance would provide humanity with valuable intelligence and diplomatic connections throughout known space. The Altarians revealed that they had been secretly supporting the resistance movement for decades by providing supplies and communication equipment to enslaved species. Their merchant vessels had carried weapons and medical supplies to rebel cells throughout Zephyrian territory. The human arrival had finally given these resistance movements the military support needed to succeed. Commodore Morrison participated in the negotiations and learned that the Altarian Federation represented over 50 different species that had joined together for mutual protection and economic cooperation. Their society was based on peaceful trade and scientific advancement, rather than military conquest. They offered to share their advanced technology with humanity in exchange for protection against aggressive empires. The alliance negotiations were complicated by the arrival of representatives from the crystalline hive mind, another major galactic civilization that had remained neutral during the Zephyrian conflicts. The collective consciousness species communicated by linking their individual minds together to share thoughts and memories. They had been studying human behavior and were impressed by humanity's commitment to protecting weaker species. Dr. Kate Wilson worked with both alien delegations to establish medical protocols for treating their unique physiologies. The Altarians were silicon-based life forms that required different atmospheric conditions, while the crystalline beings existed as a collective consciousness that shared sensory experiences. Human medical technology proved adaptable enough to meet the needs of both species. The negotiations resulted in the formation of the Galactic Liberation Alliance with humanity, providing military leadership, while the Altarians contributed economic resources and the crystalline hive mind offered advanced computational capabilities. The three civilizations agreed to work together to free enslaved species throughout the galaxy and prevent future conquests by aggressive empires. Amy Foster analyzed intelligence provided by the new allies and discovered that the Zephyrian Empire was only one of 7 major aggressive civilizations that dominated this region of the galaxy. The Void Hunters, the Iron Hegemony, and the Crimson Syndicate all controlled large territories through military force and enslaved countless species. The Liberation Alliance would face multiple enemies as their campaign expanded. The Alliance's first major test came when the Zephyrian Empire launched a desperate counterattack against the liberated worlds. Emperor Thax Supreme had assembled every available warship in a final attempt to crush the human-led rebellion before it could spread further. Over 200 alien vessels approached Kepler-7 in the largest military operation in Zephyrian history. Commodore Morrison commanded the defense of the liberated territory, with 30 human ships supported by Altarian merchant vessels converted for combat and crystalline vessels that used exotic energy weapons. The defending fleet was outnumbered but had superior technology and tactics developed through months of successful operations against Zephyrian forces. The battle began when Zephyrian scouts detected the human fleet positioned near a nebula that interfered with long-range sensors. Emperor Thax Supreme ordered his forces to advance in tight formation, expecting to overwhelm the defenders through superior numbers. The alien emperor had learned nothing from previous defeats and continued to rely on outdated tactics. Tony Blake coordinated the combined fleet's weapons as they engaged the approaching enemy force. Human kinetic weapons worked alongside Altarian particle beams and crystalline energy disruptors to create devastating crossfires that tore through Zephyrian formations. The Alliance had developed new tactics that combined the strengths of all 3 technologies. The crystalline hive mind's collective consciousness allowed them to predict enemy movements and coordinate defensive actions with perfect timing. Their vessels moved in perfect synchronization while human ships provided heavy firepower, and Altarian vessels used their superior speed to strike at vulnerable targets. The Alliance fleet fought as a single coordinated unit. Lisa Rodriguez had been working with alien engineers to develop hybrid technologies that combined human, Altarian, and crystalline systems. The Alliance ships were more powerful and efficient than any individual civilization could produce alone. The technological cooperation had created weapons and defenses that no single empire could match. The Zephyrian fleet found itself outmaneuvered and outgunned as Alliance forces used superior coordination and firepower to systematically destroy enemy vessels. Emperor Thax Supreme watched in horror as his largest military force was methodically dismantled by an enemy that fought with unprecedented unity and effectiveness. Ryan Martinez led boarding parties that captured key Zephyrian vessels, including the Emperor's flagship. The Alliance needed prisoners for intelligence purposes and wanted to capture the Zephyrian leadership alive if possible. The Emperor himself was taken prisoner along with his senior commanders in an operation that demonstrated the Alliance's growing military capabilities. The defeat of the Zephyrian Empire's main fleet marked the beginning of the end for their 1,000-year reign of terror. Enslaved worlds throughout their territory rose in coordinated rebellions as news of the victory spread through resistance networks. The Empire's control collapsed as their military forces were unable to suppress simultaneous uprisings across dozens of star systems. Admiral Collins established the new Galactic Liberation Command with headquarters on the former Zephyrian capital world. The Alliance began the complex process of rebuilding civilizations that had been destroyed or enslaved for centuries. Human technology and resources were used to restore damaged worlds, while Altarian trade networks helped re-establish economic connections between liberated species. The success against the Zephyrian Empire attracted attention from across the galaxy as neutral civilizations considered joining the growing alliance. The promise of protection from aggressive empires was appealing to species that had lived in fear for generations. The alliance offered an alternative to conquest and domination that many civilizations found attractive. Danny Wright coordinated communications between dozens of resistance movements that were planning uprisings against other oppressive empires. The Void Hunters and Iron Hegemony were facing their own internal rebellions as enslaved species gained hope from the Alliance's successes. The liberation movement was spreading beyond Zephyrian territory to threaten tyrannical governments throughout the region. The captured Emperor Thax Supreme was interrogated by Alliance intelligence officers who learned about cooperative agreements between the various aggressive empires. The tyrannical civilizations had been coordinating their expansion efforts and sharing enslaved populations through complex trade arrangements. The Alliance would need to prepare for war against multiple enemies simultaneously. 2 years after the first encounter with the Zephyrian Empire, the Galactic Liberation Alliance had grown into a coalition of over 100 liberated species spanning 3 major star sectors. Admiral Morrison commanded the Alliance fleet from his flagship, the UHS Unity, while coordinating military operations across vast distances. The former exploration captain had become one of the most respected military leaders in galactic history. The Alliance faced its greatest challenge when the remaining aggressive empires formed the Dominion Pact, a military alliance designed to crush the liberation movement before it could spread further. The Void Hunters, Iron Hegemony, Crimson Syndicate, and 4 other tyrannical civilizations had assembled the largest military force ever seen in this region of the galaxy. Over 1,000 warships from 7 different empires were approaching Alliance territory. Admiral Collins had returned to Earth to coordinate the production of an entirely new generation of human warships. The lessons learned from 2 years of galactic warfare had revolutionized human military technology. Earth's shipyards were producing vessels that incorporated the best features of human, Altarian, and crystalline designs, along with technology captured from defeated enemies. The Alliance's intelligence network had identified the Dominion Pact's strategy of attacking multiple liberated worlds simultaneously to stretch Alliance forces too thin for effective defense. The enemy planned to reconquer enslaved species one system at a time while preventing the Alliance from concentrating their forces for counterattacks. It was a sound strategy that might have worked against any previous opponent. Commodore Lisa Rodriguez commanded the Alliance's engineering corps and had spent months preparing for the coming battle. Every liberated world now had defensive platforms, armed with hybrid weapons that could hold off enemy fleets until reinforcements arrived. The Alliance had learned to fight defensively while maintaining the ability to strike back at enemy territory. The first attacks came simultaneously across 12 different star systems as Dominion Pact forces attempted to overwhelm Alliance defenses through coordinated assaults. The enemy had superior numbers, but the Alliance had better technology, superior tactics, and the advantage of fighting to defend their homes and freedom. Every liberated species was willing to sacrifice everything to avoid returning to slavery, Amy. Foster coordinated the Alliance's response from the Strategic Command Center on the former Zephyrian capital world. The crystalline hive mind's collective consciousness allowed them to process massive amounts of tactical data and coordinate defensive actions across multiple battlefields simultaneously. Their computational abilities gave the Alliance unprecedented situational awareness. The battle for the Kalari home system became the turning point of the war when Alliance forces used new gravitational weapons developed by Altarian scientists. The exotic technology could create artificial gravity wells that trapped enemy ships or crushed them with irresistible force. The Void Hunter fleet attacking the system was completely destroyed when they were caught in a gravity field that collapsed their ships like tin cans. Tony Blake led the Alliance fighter squadrons that provided support for ground forces defending liberated worlds. Human pilots worked alongside volunteers from dozens of different species in combined formations that maximized each civilization's unique capabilities. The multi-species squadrons were proving devastatingly effective against enemy forces that had never faced such coordinated diversity. The Iron Hegemony's assault on the manufacturing world of New Altair was repelled by a combination of human, marines, crystalline warriors, and liberated slave soldiers fighting together. The Alliance ground forces used advanced weapons and tactics that the enemy could not counter. More importantly, they were fighting for freedom, while their opponents were fighting for conquest and domination. Dr. Kate Wilson had established medical stations throughout Alliance territory that could treat wounded personnel from any species in the coalition. The advanced medical technology had saved thousands of lives and demonstrated the Alliance's commitment to protecting all its members equally. The Medical Corps had become a symbol of hope and unity throughout liberated space. The Crimson Syndicates. Attack on the strategic world of Haven 3 was defeated when local resistance forces coordinated with arriving Alliance reinforcements to trap the enemy fleet between planetary defenses and approaching warships. The Syndicate's forces were annihilated in a battle that showcased the effectiveness of cooperation between professional military forces and civilian volunteers. Ryan Martinez commanded the Alliance's Special Operations Forces that conducted raids deep into enemy territory. Multi-species teams infiltrated Dominion-packed worlds to sabotage military installations and encourage slave uprisings. The raids were causing chaos throughout enemy territory as their control over enslaved populations began to collapse. The Alliance's greatest victory came when they captured the Void Hunter's main fleet base and discovered the location of the secret meeting where Dominion Pact leaders were planning their next offensive. A joint task force of human, Altarian, and crystalline ships launched a surprise attack that captured the enemy leadership and decapitated their command structure. Sam Carter had been promoted to Admiral and commanded the Alliance's Rapid Response fleet that moved between threatened systems to provide reinforcement wherever needed. The mobility and flexibility of Alliance forces allowed them to defeat enemy attacks that should have succeeded through superior numbers. The Alliance fought smarter rather than harder. The capture of the Dominion Pact leadership effectively ended organized resistance to the liberation movement. Without central coordination, the remaining aggressive empires began fighting among themselves for territory and resources. The Alliance was able to defeat them piecemeal as enslaved populations throughout their territories rose in rebellion. Danny Wright coordinated the establishment of the new Galactic Council, a democratic organization where liberated species could work together to maintain peace and prevent future conquests. The Council's charter guaranteed the rights of all civilizations to self-determination and protection from aggression. Humanity had not only won the war, but created a framework for lasting peace. The final battle of the Liberation War took place at the former Iron Hegemony capital, where Alliance forces faced the last organized enemy fleet. The battle lasted 6 hours and ended with the complete surrender of the remaining Dominion Pact forces. The age of galactic tyranny was over, and a new era of cooperation and freedom had begun. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Unity and watched the surrender ceremony where representatives from dozens of liberated species signed the Galactic Freedom Accords. The document established principles of non-aggression, mutual defense, and cooperative development that would govern relations between civilizations throughout the region. The alliance had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations by proving that cooperation between diverse species was more powerful than any single empire's military force. The liberated civilizations had created something new in galactic history, a multi-species democracy based on freedom, equality, and mutual respect. As the ceremony concluded, Admiral Morrison reflected on how far humanity had come since the Defiance first encountered the Zephyrian Empire. What had begun as a peaceful exploration mission had evolved into a galactic liberation movement that freed billions of enslaved beings. The galaxy had underestimated humanity's determination to fight for justice and their ability to inspire others to join them in that fight. The warning that spread throughout the remaining aggressive civilizations was simple and clear. Humanity did not fight just to defend themselves, but to defend anyone who needed protection. Attack them, and you were not just fighting one species, but the entire alliance of liberated worlds. The galaxy would never be the same again, because humanity had shown that freedom was worth fighting for, and that tyranny could be defeated when good people worked together.